Alright, hi everyone. I hope you guys are having a great day. So today we will actually have our last lecture video talking about aggression. And so after today's video, we will have completed the material for the course. So you will have everything that you need for exam 4. I'm also going to be posting a review video where I talk about the study guide for you. Now remember that exam 4 is the required proctored exam, so make sure that you're taking this exam with an appropriate proctor. It will be password protected. You'll not be able to use your notes, so make sure that you have prepared for it. And once again, if you have questions as you are preparing for it, please feel free to email me. So after exam 4 is over, I will be posting your grade in the class before the final exam, because you do have a drop grade for exams. So this will allow you to decide whether or not you want to use the final exam as your drop grade and not take it, or whether you want to take it. So I will be posting after exam 4 closes, and I do go in and give everyone credit for the opinion questions. Then I will be posting your grade in the class before the final exam. So if you're happy with that grade, then you're done. You don't have to take the final exam. If you're not happy, then the final exam could potentially help you. If you're considering doing the final exam, I encourage you to just email me to make sure that the final exam can improve your grade. So if you missed an exam, or if you're only a few points away from the next letter grade, then it's more likely to help you, and I will be posting the points that you have before the final exam. But if you are maybe right at that cutoff point, so maybe if you have 400 points, that means you have a B, right? But you're 50 points away from an A. So it's not likely, unless you missed an exam or you had one exam where you scored very, very low on it, it's not likely that the final exam would help you. So I encourage you, if you are thinking about taking the final exam, unless you've missed an exam or had one that was very low, I suggest you email me just to make sure that the final exam can help you. Okay? So I'll be sending out email reminders about that. Remember, I do have office hours on Mondays from 8 to 12, so feel free to drop by if you have any questions, okay? Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get into lecture for today. Alright, so today we are going to have our last lecture video of the semester. And before we get into it, I do want to just apologize. They are cutting the grass outside of my house. And I wanted to go ahead and get this lecture video recorded for you guys, because I know some of you are taking the proctored exam early next week. So hopefully there won't be any loud noises in the background, but if there are, you know what that is now. So this is our last lecture. We're going to talk about aggression. So why are we talking about aggression in a social psychology class? Well, if social psychology is all about how we influence other people and how we are influenced by other people, then aggression is certainly a valid topic. So we're going to have to start off with a definition of what is aggression so that we all know what we're talking about. Now, there are several potential definitions for aggression. I like this one though. Intentional behavior aimed at doing harm or causing pain to another person. So first of all, notice that it is intentional. To be aggressive, you have to really be trying to hurt the other person in some way or trying to intimidate them. Now, when it says aimed at doing harm or causing pain, that does not necessarily mean physical pain. We can have verbal aggression and emotional aggression. We can have other kinds of aggression, and you'll see later in the lecture video that some of us are more prone to one kind of aggression versus another. But all of these things would be considered aggression if we are intentionally trying to hurt another person. So your activity this week is to think about aggression and try to figure out why we have so much aggression. Is this because of nature or nurture, first of all? Remember that nature is our biology, it's our genetics. So when I say, is aggression the result of nature, I mean, is it part of who we are? Is it part of the human experience? Is it something that's related to our hormones? Something that's related to some deep-seated survival instinct that we are born with? Or is it related to nurture? With nurture, we're talking about the environment. So are we aggressive because we see other people being aggressive, because we watch aggressive video games or television shows? Are we aggressive because we're modeling the people in our lives that we see being aggressive? So are we aggressive because we are born aggressive? Or are we aggressive because we are taught to be aggressive? That's the first part of the question, and there's no right or wrong answer here. This is your opinion. But I also want you to tell me, do you think that in our culture, in America, we have a problem with aggression? And I also want you to think about what can be done to decrease aggression. And you might even mention whether or not you think we should be doing something to decrease aggression. Because on the one hand, aggression obviously can have some very negative effects when we're talking about hurting other people, but also isn't aggression part of the American way to be competitive, to feel like we have to be better than everyone else? We could debate that all day long. But I want you to tell me, where does aggression come from? Is it a problem? And what can we do to decrease it if it is a problem? So talking about aggression, we see here that men are more aggressive, typically, especially physically aggressive. And we'll talk about the different kinds of aggression and gender in a few minutes. But men tend to be more aggressive, especially physically aggressive, than women. Now, we know that this is true. What we don't know is why. And so we're going to talk about a few possibilities. Now, according to evolutionary psychology, which I think we've referenced maybe earlier in the semester, but the idea here is just that the most important thing we can do is to pass on our genetics, right? The idea of evolutionary psychology is that all of what we're doing is trying to successfully reproduce and pass on our genes to a new generation. According to that theory, then, first of all, men behave aggressively to secure status, right? To be the alpha, if you will. Assuming then that the alpha has more access to potential mates and also resources. And so then maybe men are more aggressive because they are trying to win more opportunities to have more mates. Also, it says that males aggress jealously. In other words, men and women have different reproductive dilemmas, whereas with women, you don't have to wonder whether or not you are the mother of the child, right? But men do have to worry about that, right? So then, a man, if you're thinking about evolutionary psychology, where what you're doing is to try to pass on your own genetics, the last thing that you want to be doing would be to providing resources for a child that is not yours, because that would be someone else's genetics. So then, perhaps, according to this evolutionary perspective, and this is just a theory, you can take it or leave it, but the idea here then is that men are more jealous and aggressive because potentially they want to make sure that any children are theirs. So we do see a difference when we look at relation science. We do see a difference that men and women tend to have different kinds of jealousies. It's not that men are more jealous, it's just that men are more likely to be jealous of sexual infidelity, whereas women are more likely to be jealous of emotional infidelity. So there is a gender difference. We don't know why, but this is one theory, right? Now, another possible explanation for why it is that men tend to be more physically aggressive than women is testosterone, right? Now, we know that there is a correlation here. A correlation just means that there is a relationship. Greater testosterone linked to greater aggression. Now, we have to be careful with this, though, because we know this is a correlation, and correlation does not equal causation. So when we look at this finding that individuals, so we're talking about males who have more testosterone, also there's a relationship here with them having more aggressive behaviors. Now, it could be that the increased testosterone then leads to them having more aggressive behaviors. That's a possibility. It's also possible that individuals who are naturally more aggressive then have more testosterone. It could be that doing the aggressive behavior then leads their bodies to produce and release more testosterone. Or there could be a third variable that might be causing both, right? That perhaps something to do with parenting, perhaps, or something to do with media or culture that causes you both to be more aggressive and to have more testosterone, right? So there are a ton of different possibilities here. We just know that there's a correlation, but it does make sense given the fact that men are more likely than women to be physically aggressive. All right, so changes in aggression across time. It says changing social conditions can change behavior. We know this is true. And that aggressiveness increases as competition increases. I referenced this a bit earlier when I was talking about the activity. But if I asked you, and I hope that you will address this in your activity, how aggressive do you think our culture is, right? We know that there's a correlation between aggressiveness and competition. Think about sports, right? And this doesn't even necessarily have to be like professional football. I mean, think about like 5-year-olds playing soccer, okay? And in that situation, sometimes there are kids that are super aggressive. I just say this because I have a 5-year-old that plays soccer. Sometimes the kids are super aggressive. Sometimes the parents are super aggressive too. And it's just because there's this competition. We have this feeling that we are Americans and we're supposed to be the best. And our kids are supposed to be the best at everything. And we are very competitive. We feel like we are supposed to do better than everyone else. And so competition is a huge part of our culture. And maybe on the one hand, that's a good thing because maybe competition is motivating. Maybe on the other hand, it's a negative thing if it's causing us to be aggressive toward each other and to not be kind toward each other. There are so many areas of life where competition, it's like my baby can walk before your baby. It starts so early in life. And I feel like competition is a good thing in small doses, but I feel like it can be a very negative thing in large doses. But we do know there's a correlation between aggressiveness and competition. All right, so the next topic that we're going to talk about related to aggression would be cultures of honor, which is something that I was not really familiar with until I started teaching this class and started looking into this textbook. It says that there is, research has shown, there's this phenomenon mostly among Southern males in rural areas. So I guess that would apply to Mississippi, that it seems like insults are especially negatively viewed in Southern males in rural areas, and that we actually have very high argument-related homicide rates. That perhaps we have this aggression that is triggered by feeling like we're being insulted and feeling like our honor is being impacted in some way. And so then it's like almost like a justification for being aggressive, that I have to maintain my honor. I can't let someone insult me. And so people can become aggressive, even to the point of homicide, even to the point of murdering someone else. So this was an interesting phenomenon that I'd heard about and not one that I realized was going on in the South. All right, so talking about gender and aggression, as we've already been alluding to, we do know that males show more physical aggression for the most part. Now, when we're talking about this research, we're talking about group level, overall. That doesn't tell us necessarily anything about any one individual. Like, we know males who are not physically aggressive. We know females who are physically aggressive. So it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. But in general, men tend to show more physical aggression, whereas women tend to show more relational aggression. And when we talk about relational aggression here, think like mean girls, starting rumors about each other, gossiping, backbiting, hurting relationships more than like physically hurting. Now, the question here is, why is it that men show more physical aggression and women show more relational aggression? And which one hurts more? Obviously, physical aggression is physically painful, but then usually that pain doesn't last very long, whereas the relational aggression can last for a very long time. I wonder if this is because this is how we are taught, that women are taught, that little girls are taught that you don't fight, that you don't hit. They may be taught that more than boys, but also they may be modeling what they see, that their mothers and that other women and that the girls on television talk about other people, and this is just kind of part of society and expectations for women to be more gossipy. And maybe it is because we know our own targets, that if women are more relational and that relationships care, like they're really important to them, they care more about those relationships, then if you're trying to hurt another woman, then relational aggression might actually be more painful. It's like we know where to stick the knife there. There could be a lot of possibilities here as to why women show more relational aggression, but it could just be that relationships are more important to women. However, the similarity here is that we are usually not aggressive unless we are provoked, right? But once we are provoked, there's certainly the possibility that someone will become aggressive, right? So talking about things that influence aggression, first of all, lest there be any kind of doubt or concern here, alcohol increases aggression. And you might be saying to yourself, well, alcohol is a depressant. It calms you down. It slows things down. So why would it increase aggression? Well, primarily because it reduces inhibitions, right? So that frontal lobe of your brain that does all of the thinking and the reasoning and the decision making is very much so impacted by alcohol. So when you drink alcohol, it can reduce those inhibitions or the self-control that you have, and can disrupt information processing where it's difficult to think logically, difficult to understand what's going on. And obviously different people have different tolerance levels for alcohol as to how much they would have to drink to become aggressive. But alcohol tends to increase aggression. And may actually not even be that much about how much you drink, but more about how much you expect the alcohol is going to impact you. I don't know if you guys saw 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. There was a scene at the beginning of the movie where the guy is trying to seduce this woman, and she's drinking this gigantic drink, and she's like, "Oh wow, I'm so drunk." And he's like, actually there's no alcohol in that. And she just kind of like freezes. But it was a placebo effect, right? The idea that even though you didn't receive the substance, you expected that it would impact you, and so it did. So it could be that someone drinks a very tiny amount of alcohol, not enough to have the alcohol itself cause them to be more aggressive, but because maybe they don't have a lot of experience with alcohol, or because they think that it will impact them more than it does, then they might actually have that placebo effect and might be very influenced by a very small amount of alcohol. Okay? Now, talking about other things in addition to alcohol that can make you more aggressive, pain increases aggression, and discomfort increases aggression. So, I don't know, have you guys ever been hungry? You hear like hangry, you get hangry, you get a migraine, you get a headache, or you're tired, it's hot. I mean, it's Mississippi now, it's starting to get hot. Even potentially air pollution, offensive odors, all of these things, anything that makes you uncomfortable also makes you more likely to be aggressive, right? And especially if you have several of these things at one time. Like if you're tired and you're sick and you're hungry, people probably need to stay out of your way, right? Now, this does not necessarily mean that we will automatically become aggressive when we are uncomfortable, and some of us have better self-control than others. But you know what I mean, that when you're uncomfortable or when you're in pain, it does make you more likely to be aggressive. Maybe because those little things that you would have dismissed when you were feeling fine, it's just one more thing on top of the pile of things that are making you miserable, and you may not be able to handle it. Notice here when it talks about heat, that you hear that old familiar example of there's a positive correlation between ice cream sales and violent crime. And it's not that the violent crime causes the ice cream sales or the ice cream sales cause the violent crime. It's that both of those tend to go up in the summer when it is very hot. I notice that my kids are crankier when it's hot outside, and I probably am too. So in addition to alcohol, pain, discomfort, other things that make you more likely to be aggressive, frustration is a very big part of being aggressive. Now, what does it mean to be frustrated? It means if you at least perceive or believe that you're being prevented from attaining a goal, that makes you more likely to be aggressive. Once again, doesn't necessarily mean that you will become aggressive, but you're more likely to become aggressive, right? So I'm sure that you can think of times in your life when you've been frustrated, right? Maybe you were trying to study for a test and your roommate was being loud. Or maybe you were trying to get into a parking spot and somebody else jumped in there and took your parking spot. Whatever the case may be, you were frustrated, right? You had a goal, whether that be to get a decent parking spot or to study for a test, and someone was preventing you from attaining that goal. It is almost a natural reaction here to at least think about being aggressive, right? Think about road rage here. I don't know if any of you guys experience road rage. We should all be polite to each other on the road, but sometimes it's really hard, right? So studying frustration and aggression, there's a research study here that wanted to see how children will handle frustration. Now, we are adults, right? Our frontal lobes are at least primarily developed. I mean, your frontal lobes develop by the age of 25, so a lot of us, our frontal lobes are developed. So we should be able to handle frustration, right? And I say that almost jokingly because frustration is still difficult. However, what about children who typically don't have very good impulse control? What's going to happen if we purposefully frustrate children? So what they did in this research study was, remember that frustration means that someone is preventing you from reaching a goal. Well, these children had the goal of playing with these particular toys. And so they wanted to create a group where one of the groups of children were frustrated because they were not getting to play with the toys. So here's what they did. Remember our terminology from research methods lectures earlier in the semester, that we have a control group and an experimental group. The control group got to play with the toys right away. The frustrated group had to wait. So they said, let this group of kids go first and then you'll get to play later. The control group got to play immediately. So when the children who were frustrated, so the children who had to wait, when they got to play with the toys, they played very aggressively with the toys. They smashed them, they threw them, they were very aggressive and very upset. The control group who got to play with the toys right away did not show aggressive behaviors. You ask the question here then, why would the children smash the toys when they get to play with them? Like, they've been waiting, I don't know how long, to get to play with these toys, and as soon as they get them, they break them. Like, that doesn't even make sense. But the children were showing aggression because they were frustrated because they had to wait, right? Now, I know that when we get older, maybe we have a little bit better behavioral control, but this can still happen to adults as well, right? Things that make us more likely to act aggressively when we feel frustrated. First of all, it says goal proximity. The closer we are to the goal, the more likely we are to get frustrated. And the more frustrated we are, the more likely we are to be aggressive. So imagine that you were standing in line at a fast food restaurant and there were 10 people in front of you and somebody jumps in front of you in line. Well, that's frustrating. But imagine if you were at the front of the line, it was your turn and somebody got in front of you. That's even more frustrating, even more likely that you would respond aggressively, right? Because you were so close to your goal. This happens with me, with my kids sometimes when I have like a very long to-do list of work stuff I'm trying to do. If I have tons of stuff to do and my kids are distracting me, I'm like, okay. But if I'm almost done and I've been trying for like 20 minutes to finish this one little thing and they keep frustrating me, I do everything I can not to be aggressive with my children. But sometimes it's really difficult. And once again, I do apologize for the lawnmower outside. I hope it's not too much of a distraction. I have no control over when they cut my grass. I'm kind of frustrated, right? I am close to my goal of finishing this lecture video, and yet people are cutting my grass outside. Anyway, very good. Unexpectedness of the frustration is also important. If you saw the frustration coming and you knew that it was going to happen, you were less likely to be bothered by it. But if it came out of the blue, it bothers you more. The example I think of here is that when my children are sick, I expect them to wake me up in the middle of the night, you know? I'm just kind of prepared for it. And I'm like, okay, you're sick, you can't help it, so that's fine. But if my kids are not sick and they wake me up in the middle of the night, it's totally unexpected and it's even more frustrating, right? So other things that are related to frustration and aggression, if the situation that caused you to be frustrated is understandable, legitimate, or unintentional, or all of the above, you're less likely to be aggressive here, right? So like I said, if my kids are sick, it makes sense that they need me, that they wake me up. I understand that. They're not trying to wake me up, they're just sick. Okay, I get that, right? But if I feel like they're doing it just because it's fun to keep mom awake for 48 hours straight, then I can get a little bit more frustrated there. So you've all seen situations where someone upset you, but they didn't do it on purpose, or maybe they couldn't help but do it, right? There was just nothing they could do to avoid it. In that situation, you're more likely to walk away from it, to forgive it, and to not be aggressive. Okay? So when we go to this question of, is aggression caused by nature or by nurture, the nurture side of things, that it's caused by our environment, this would be reflected in the social learning theory. The idea that we learn social behaviors by observing others and imitating them. And this was a big part of my thesis research, and a lot of research has been done on social learning theory, that we look to the most relevant role models that we have to learn how to be successful when we're children, right? So if we see role models in our lives, whether that be parents or siblings or teachers or peers or people on television being aggressive, then we learn that being aggressive is acceptable or maybe even desirable, and then that's obviously going to increase aggression. Now, how are we going to research this idea of social learning theory. Well, you may have heard of the Bandura's Bobo doll studies. I should have pulled up a picture here of what a Bobo doll looks like, but it's just like a big inflatable doll thing that has a weight at the bottom, so if you knock it down, it comes back up, right? So the research question here, if children see an adult being aggressive, will that cause them to behave aggressively? Will the children imitate the behavior of the adult, right? That's what we want to know. So, remember your research terms here. The independent variable is the thing that you are manipulating. The dependent variable is the thing that you're measuring. So what they manipulated here was the child's exposure to an aggressive model. So we had an experimental group that saw an aggressive model and a control group that did not. So the experimental group had an adult come in and start hitting, banging, beating up on this Bobo doll, right? The control group did not see someone beating up on a Bobo doll. Now the question is, will the children in the experimental group who saw an adult being aggressive, will they be more likely to be aggressive than the children in the control group who did not see an adult being aggressive? You can probably see where this is going here. Yes, the children imitated the aggressive adults. So if they saw an adult being aggressive, then they treated the doll in an abusive way and even imitated the exact actions of the adult. Now, I'm not going to go too much here into types of punishment, right? And it's not my job to tell parents how to raise their children, but I will say that one of the reasons why I do not use physical punishment with my children is that I don't want them to model that, right? So children modeling what they see, if their parent spanks them for hitting another child, then that's confusing, that doesn't make sense to them. They're more likely to hit other children if they have been hit themselves, right? So there are lots of other, and if you're interested, contact me. I'd be happy to talk to you about behavior modification and other ways to discipline children. But the idea here is that children do tend to model what they see, whereas the children in the control group who never saw an adult being aggressive, they showed very, very little aggression. They found other ways of playing with the dolls other than being aggressive. So then we know that at least part of aggression is what we see. It is part of our environment, part of our nurture. So then this leads us to our question of media violence. It is a very common debate of how much of the violence in our culture is caused by the media. And we feel like we need to know this because if our culture and the children in our culture are too aggressive, then perhaps we need to do something to limit the violence that they see on television, right? Now we know that research does suggest that watching violence on television increases aggression and angry and hostile thoughts, okay? Especially if it's video games. And probably the reason why the video games are worse than movies or television is because with a video game, you're actually controlling the person. Like you're actually the one who is doing the aggression, basically, versus just seeing someone else do it. But the question here of whether or not the media causes violence is a difficult question to research because most of this research is correlational in nature. So it could be that the children who watch more violent media then become more aggressive. But it could also be that children who are naturally aggressive tend to gravitate towards more aggressive forms of media. They're more entertained by video games or movies that show a lot of aggressive thoughts. Or it could be a third variable causing both. And this is where, if this was an in-person class and I could actually talk to you guys, I would ask you the question of at what age is it appropriate for children to be exposed to media violence? Because obviously at some point children are going to see violent movies. And so when is it okay? When is it not okay? And is it strictly based on age or also maturity level or the kind of violence? So there's a lot to talk about here. But we know that there is a correlation here for whatever reason. So exposure to media violence, first of all, increases physiological arousal and excitement. So when you're watching a violent movie, you do have an increase in heart rate, you do have an increase in blood pressure, and so it does tend to make people get excited. It also tends to lead to imitation of violent characters, especially in children. So we see that the children in the Bobo doll experiment, they were being aggressive in the exact same way that they saw the adults being aggressive. So maybe it's because they're imitating it, maybe it's because it gave them ideas, right? Because it does say it primes aggressive ideas and expectations, and it shows children perhaps that aggression is a good thing or it's desirable, because you see the hero in the movies is usually one of the most aggressive ones, right? They're aggressive because they manage to survive to the end of the movies, right? And then also social scripts here, we're telling them that it's an appropriate way to deal with issues, right? Because in the movies, a lot of times, there is some kind of insult or some kind of issue, and the hero, if you will, ends up responding in a very aggressive way and is celebrated, and it turns out well for that person. You don't usually see the consequences for it, and therefore maybe it creates a script for children to follow, as well as adults, that it's okay to be violent, right? My son loves dinosaurs. He has recently made the switch from superheroes to dinosaurs, and he wants so badly to see Jurassic World because he's 5, right? But he has the Jurassic World toys that you get at like Walmart, and he wants so badly to see this movie. I'm like, I can't let you watch this movie. He's like, oh, it's just dinosaurs. I know, I can't let you watch this movie, right? But at what point is it okay for children to start watching violent movies? Like, I don't know that there's a right answer here that applies to everyone. Okay. Alright, so that is actually the end of the lecture video for this week, and this is the last lecture video that we have. It's really been a pleasure getting to know you guys over the semester. If you need anything, let me know. Remember that there will also be a review video that I'm going to be posting. Remember that next week you need to take the required proctored exam, Exam 4. After Exam 4 closes, I will be posting the grades in the class so you can decide whether or not you want to complete the take-home final exam. So just let me know if you need anything, and I hope you guys have a great day.